Warning: the following audio may contain coarse language and other materials that may not be suitable for a younger audience. The opinions expressed in this audio are solely those of the speakers involved. These conversations may contain spoilers for current media such as games, comics, movies, television shows, and more. Grown Geeks makes no claim to ownership of the various media discussed, simply the opinions expressed. Listener discretion is advised.
Yo, what's up? It is Weigh In Wednesday. We are Grown Geeks. This is Weigh In Wednesday, and you are awesome for being here. What's going on, people? What y'all doing tonight? Got a pretty interesting show tonight. Something that I thought about and thought, this would be a really good topic, and I thought it would be great to discuss the live action movie craze. Like, everything is live action these days. Every time you turn around, somebody's making a live action remake of something. Anime is getting live action. What happened to shows just being shows? Why the push for live action? What's that all about? We're going to talk about it. I am your host, Elder Geek Sam. My co-host will be joining me here in just a bit. And of course, we encourage those of you watching to join us. Be a part of the show. Come and see what we're talking about. If you have an opinion on it, you want to discuss it, then by all means, come on in, hop in the show, be a part. We certainly encourage that, and everyone is welcome to participate. Your comments will be on screen, and if you care to actually join in, the link to join is in the comments section. So find the comments, and you can be a part of the show. And if you don't know where that is, just send me a message on whatever you're watching it on, wherever you're watching it, and I will send you a link. I'm trying to see. There we go. Got it pulled up. So we are live right now. Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. We are here. And we're going to talk about some live action. Some of the things that we're going to cover, of course, some of the best live action adaptations. We're going to talk about some of the worst live action adaptations, some of the upcoming live action adaptations, and like why does everything have to be live action? Anime is good as anime. Why do we have to see it live? Why are people interested in that? So I'm just going to sit here and run my mouth as I do for a little bit until some of my teammates join in, so some of my co-hosts are here. But let's go through just some of the upcoming live actions. David Gordon posted the question in our Facebook group. That group, of course, is Grown Geeks. You can find Grown Geeks. If you click the QR code there in the corner, you can scan that, and that'll take you to everywhere you can find us, all the social media platforms we exist in. And you can join our group. And he had posted in the group asking about some upcoming shows. We were looking for, we're always looking for topics, always open it to the group. Like, hey, what do you guys think we should talk about? Always ask on Tuesdays for show ideas for Wednesdays, if we don't already have something lined up. Many times we do already kind of have an idea of what we're going to discuss and that sort of thing. But there are times when I am just looking to get feedback from other people and, see what they have to say, see what they think. And on yesterday's post, it was Tuesday topics. What would you like for us to discuss? And one of our members, David Gordon, posted a comment. He said he wanted to talk about upcoming TV shows or movies that we are excited or cautiously optimistic about. And I'd mentioned we were going to be talking about some television shows. We got some stuff coming up that we're going to be discussing anyway, and we'll be talking about Black Mirror here very soon because that's a fantastic show that I love and enjoy, and that'll be something that comes up. But in the meantime, I asked, what shows did he have in mind? One of the ones he mentioned, of course, was the live action One Piece, and of course that got me to thinking. I've got a son. I've got three kids. My oldest son is currently trying to get caught up on One Piece. He's watching all of the episodes, and I have no idea where he is, but he's far, and they've got a million episodes of One Piece. So kudos to him for having gotten through as many episodes as he has. But David mentioned that he wanted to talk about the live action One Piece that was coming up and mentioned that, he's kind of new to both manga and anime, and he wanted to know what he should anticipate. He was actually disappointed with the Cowboy Bebop remake. And one of my moderators, one of my co-hosts, David, you all know him as Hatman, Heroic Hat. He and I did a very in-depth breakdown of the Cowboy Bebop remake. So, of course, you can find that on our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But go and find the video we did on Cowboy Bebop, and you can, you'll hear our thoughts and what we thought. And I feel like we did a pretty in-depth analysis of the series, of the show, and what it was, the good, the bad, if you will, even the interesting or quirky parts. And as we're coming up, we've got One Piece is getting a live action update. Avatar, The Last Airbender, is getting a newer live action update. And we've seen casting announcements and things like that. And of course, that one's kind of looking a little bit better than it did the first time. So I think this time around, since M. Night Shyamalan is not associated with it at all, then we should be able to expect some good things. We can be hopeful for good things this go round. I think the show the casting at least seems to be on par with the expectations people would typically have. And I think that's going to make a big difference in the final result, what actually comes out. So because the Facebook group, because the member asked on Facebook, like, he was talking about One Piece, that got me to thinking about, like, man, yeah, that is coming up, and that's live action. And if you're not really into anime and you're not really into manga, why would you be interested in watching this new show? Is live action a good way, a segue for people who don't know a lot about different things? Is it more inviting? Do people have feelings about animation as a whole? Does nostalgia play a part because people have watched things for years and now it's getting live action? Is it a way for Hollywood to try to breathe new life, or are they just rehashing old ideas to make a buck? So that's what we're going to talk about. I guess while we wait, I will get into some of my personal favorites as far as the live action. I mean, of course, it goes without saying that everything from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and even the DCEU and now the upcoming DCU would, without a doubt, be the things that come to mind first for the good in live action. Having read comic books for years, being a major comic book fan, an avid comic book reader, being able to see those characters come to life. I mean, cartoons are great. Like we have Justice League Unlimited, Justice League, Superman The Adventures of Superman, Batman the animated series, the what is it, Spider-Man, whichever, the one that was in the late '90s, that Spider-Man cartoon. Like all those were great, and those were animated and not live action. But to see those themes brought to life, it does add a certain element. I think perhaps the greatest joy for me, and this is probably what I would categorize as the good, um, when you have something that you're fond of, that you've enjoyed in an animated medium, when you see that live action, I think the connection is, even with CGI, even with the far-fetched aspect of what comics are, it gives it a sense of reality, that realism, the possibility that it could truly exist. I think that makes a big difference. And I think that is what people are generally drawn to. And I think that's why live action has done well as a whole. Not everything that's a live action remake has done well. I mean, Disney has, a lot of people felt like Disney was just trying to get us for money again by showing us the same thing, only this time it was real. The Lion King remake comes to mind. They've just done The Little Mermaid. Um, some things go over better than others, but I believe it is the feeling that it could be grounded in reality. When you see something live action, when you see real people do things on screen that you previously had only seen in cartoons, it gives a sense of realism that makes the fantasy a little less fantasy. And it gives us hope for our real life, if you will. But don't just take my word for it. Let me bring in one of my co-hosts tonight. This is my grounded rod, my cultural appraiser, uh, and he is probably the person that's really, really shined a new light on how I look at stuff. Bringing Jeffrey on. What's going on, Jeffrey?
What's up? I was not expecting such an
Such a
heartfelt
warm
intro.
welcome. No,
Yeah,
man, it's important that I think people need to, your perspective on things, um, given your ties to the industry for so long, and the insight you have. I don't think it has really changed your perspective. It just allowed you to kind of see, peek behind the curtain, and
yeah.
you look at it with a different set of lenses
It's
because
kind
you
of
can
like,
see both sides.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of like somebody who grew up loving sports, and then you become a professional athlete. Like, yeah, you still like, there is an opportunity. There's a balance between like being a person who like still loves the game, but also like understands like the business aspects of it. And I think I'm just kind of always the kind of I think I just look at everything where it's just like obviously like being black in America comes with certain experiences which can lead to somewhat of a communal perspective on things. And I think a lot of the perspective of the community that I grew up in was, yes, okay, this is how things are, but do they have to be that way? And if they don't have to be that way, how could they be? And I think, unfortunately, that falls under the realm of fantasy,
Right.
which, like, it should, like, there is, like, this fantastic life that people out there are able to live. Like, we see it, but there's barriers and obstacles and things like that for us to contend with. on our journeys in life. And I think that has always been kind of how I looked at the real world. And I think just all kinds of storytelling has been something for me, a way to understand how people think about the world.
Right.
Like, if you build your own world that is absolutely nothing about the world that we actually live in, what are you saying about the world that we live in through the choices that you make of what to include and what not to include? And so I think even being involved in the industry on the business side, that is not something that, like, I didn't get it. I don't like stories because I'm like, oh, this is all real and it's all passion. It's like, no, people get paid to create this stuff. But, and I'm fine with that. Like, people should get paid to create this stuff. Like, go back and listen to our episode where we talked about the writer's strike, and like, you'll definitely hear my position on, understanding the need to be compensated for, like, your art. Like, you're creating something, like you're making something. Just like you go to the store and you spend $4.99 on a box of Frosted Flakes. Like, people who create stories are actually making things as well, maybe less tangible, but like things nonetheless. But then, like, those things that they create lead to tangible things, like books and movies and art, and you know what I mean, like all these ways that those worlds can get manifested in real life. And I just kind of am like, nothing is ever going to get in the way of people creating those stories. So however I feel about business attached to it, I'm not gonna let it ever affect, because I know, like, how successful something is monetarily is not an actual direct correlation to its overall quality.
Batman v Superman.
Right. So so yeah, it's like, even when talking about these things, I'm always looking at it from the standpoint of like, okay, like when people are get upset about like casting choices or whatever, and it's just like, well, like business wise, like you have to understand, like, people don't just make like one movie at a studio. Generally, like when you make something at a studio, you're signing up to make like a few things. And every now and then they might just be doing a throwaway project just to get one of the movies knocked off their contract so they can have like their own freedom. And there's a lot of, you once you learn that there's a lot of that, and some of the stuff where you think it's like we're really picking like the best person, but really you're picking people also who have like good contractual obligations, good brand identity, all followings that they can already like bring to the base. Like, all that stuff is like valuable, because everything that you make is about how much money it makes for the company when you work on something at that scale, right?
Right.
The issue then becomes that people value, once people start valuing the return more than they value the like creation, it impacts the creation. Like Quincy Jones said, once money walks into the room, creativity walks out, which means like, you go back and listen to like, Michael Jackson demos, a lot of them are on YouTube. It's him in his like home studio, and he can't play instruments, but he's singing and he's beatboxing, he's creating the groove. Like, Quincy Jones polishes it up and he puts the arrangements and the horns and makes it sound like, this is professional music. But that core, that's Michael. That's right. That's his rhythm. That's his fire that burns in him, that he's getting out in this way, through song, through dance. You know what I mean? And it's not something you can replicate. And it's not something that like the people who understood how to capitalize best on talent like that are often people who know when to get out of the way.
Yeah. You gotta let the creative process take control, and when it's good, you let it be good. Find a way
Right.
to maybe make it better, but don't stop the flow.
But not even that, because if it's good, right?
Right?
It was good without you messing with it.
See, and
The
that's
really
actually
9 times out of 10, the
yeah.
only thing you can do as like a person on the business side to make something better is put more money into it, but not necessarily more of your
Input.
perspective or voice on it, because you are not an artist. And just like I can't come into, as an artist, I can't come into your office as an executive and say, this is what you should be green lighting, because I don't know nothing about the politics of what gets greenlit. I don't know anything about, you know what I mean? But
Right.
once, if you look at an idea that's been pulled together and you had nothing to do with pulling that idea together, like, unless you're bringing in another creative person who has done it on a bigger level, like i.e. Michael Jackson is going solo and he says, I need somebody to help me like put my album together. He meets Quincy Jones on the set of The Wiz and history. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like some of the greatest albums ever composed, put together, because the person that was guiding was an artist. Like Quincy Jones is like classically trained. Like he went overseas and studied, like musical composition. Like he can conduct an orchestra. Not just like, oh, I play the piano really good. Like, no, he can arrange music for various instruments in various genres. He has done it when you look through his career. But like Bob Iger is not that. He's the money man.
He's a businessman.
He's the big. He's
not
10,000 feet. He's looking from 10,000 feet and saying like, this is what I want it to look like when I touch the ground. But the problem is sometimes those people come down to the ground and they're like, oh, well, this doesn't look ready and this isn't this and this isn't that. And it's just like, that's how a lot of these live action adaptations be looking terrible, because they come in, the wrong people come in, and they're not just like, let's tell a Cinderella story. Somebody said, let's make the exact version of the cartoon movie with live action. They don't say, well, let's tell a mermaid live action story. They say, let's remake Little Mermaid, but with live action. But it's pretty much going to be the same thing. Like, an artist would go into that situation and say, I would love to make a live action Little Mermaid and pay homage. But does it have to be Ariel and Prince Eric? And this, well, does it have to be this exact story? Or does this exact story have to be told in this exact way? Do we have to sing the exact same songs? Like, like visually, it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, you have to play inside of the medium that you have.
Right.
And so, like as an artist, if you're drawing on paper, it's different from drawing digitally. It's different from drawing with the pencil, is different to using ink, which is different from using acrylic paint, watercolor paint, oil paint. Like the thing about it is you have to accept that if you are using this medium, this is what this medium does. Like if you use an India ink is black. So the way that you draw needs to be informed by contrast versus watercolor.
Light
You're gonna have
shadows.
to slow down. Yeah, you're gonna have to slow down with watercolor, because if you don't, your colors are gonna get all muddled. The paper is gonna get oversaturated. Like you have to accept
the limitations,
the boundaries. Because I don't want to think about it as a limitation. It's not a limitation because there is others. It's not a coffin. Okay. You know what I'm saying? like you get to create beautiful things with the medium if used properly. But if you're just going to stand on the fence, you're going to stand on the watercolor fence looking over at acrylic, just wishing like if only it dried as fast and this and that, and I could just use it like this. And it's like behind you, you got this whole big yard of all the things that you can do with watercolor. It's the same thing with film and animation. We go to animation to create things sometimes that are not possible to create in like the physical world.
Being free of limitations and being able to show scenes and imagery that doesn't translate as well, I think, sometimes with live action. You can do it and it's been done, but the visual medium just fits better sometimes in animated form.
Well, and also it's like, okay, you have you have all these like special effects and things you can do. You can make anything. And what you want to make is like the most realistic looking version of this. Like The Little Mermaid, and I would say in animation in general, like the color coding is a huge part of storytelling. And the color coding is honestly, the coloring and the style is something that most people don't understand whether they're attracted to or not, because like there's cartoons that like people are just like, I don't like this cartoon. They don't know why. And the reason why is like you don't like the art style. You don't like the line work or the shading or something about it visually is upsetting to you, but there's no visual arts communications classes, so like people don't really understand.
They don't know the terminology.
Like, they don't know when they're being like repelled by something that they're like looking at a lot of times. And when you bring it into the real world, oftentimes the issue is it is not stylized. So like think about, for instance, comic book movies that have worked. Christopher Nolan's Batman. When you look at that trilogy, that is set in the real world, but that's not how the real world looks. It's not amber. Like we're not in the desolate future where like only melanated people can survive outside past 20 minutes because the sun is scorched and all. Like, but that's how the Batman movies like look with Christopher Nolan. Yeah, they have like a feel. You think about Ninja Turtles, that grainy, like early New Line cinema, like these ain't HD cameras that we watching. And it's like even back then, that was kind of one of those things where you could use that as like a separation where it's like this is real world, but like this is some sort of a fantastic story that's being told. The grittiness of the film matching the grittiness of the comic book. The different, I would say Marvel did this very well a lot of times visually, where the like they didn't shy. They unlike Bryan Singer's X-Men, which just went all black leather. They're like, no, Iron Man is red and gold. Yeah. And so his suit's going to be red and gold, even with all the crazy nanotechnology. And in the real world, we all know that suit would be like gray and black. But it's like, no, Iron Man is red and gold. And that's what we're going to do. Captain America wears blue. Like, we're gonna make that grittier, and we're gonna make it out of real material. He's not gonna be out there in spandex because that's crazy. But it's gonna be red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, you talk about live action adaptation. I'm willing to give a compliment to a live adaptation that I truly hate, and that is The Last Airbender. Visually, the way it was colored, the way that it was filmed is very, very impressive. And it is a great what is the word I'm looking for? Not like when you transpose something, but like you have to like change the medium. I think that the way that they decided to like color code and grain and film and all that stuff, whatever they did visually, how
See,
they shot.
that's an art word, so you would probably know it. I won't,
Yeah,
but I do understand
yeah.
what you're saying as far as
But
like
the
making the
translation, it was a great translation because
right.
if you look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's a pretty bright and colorful cartoon. It's dark when it
Yep.
needs to be, but like, you know, but the film I think did a great job of translating from cartoon to real life and feeling grounded in a world visually. But I think sometimes it's just too much on the like if you're gonna remake the cartoon, then remake the cartoon with all the colors and don't just like dull everything down and like make it like a true period piece. Like I don't want to see that. I want to see the cartoon version of this. Like I want it to feel fantastic. And sometimes I think, Batman works making it gritty. Ninja Turtles works making it gritty. These dudes is doing hand to hand combat in alleyways and zip lining from building to building in the rain in the middle of the night. It makes sense for those movies to be gritty
Right.
and grounded and like kind of color graded in this like non fantastic way. But if I'm watching a movie about, and I'm honestly, I hadn't even seen Little Mermaid. It was not a movie that I was like, I felt any connection to like as a child.
Right.
And, I have a 5-year-old boy who was not really like interested in seeing it either. So and I'll probably watch it on Disney Plus at some point just because I do like um, Halle Bailey. I like her singing a lot. Chloe and Halle, I like that group a lot. So
I'm a
I'll
Chloe
watch
fan,
eventually. Yeah, I know you.
but
Don't make me get the spray bottle, Sam.
right.
But yeah, I I'm a fan of her too, but for her singing.
Yeah. So with the visual medium, Ronnie Kitchen's probably the only good true to anime live action we have gotten. You know, I was we will. I'm definitely going to speak on that in just a moment. Um, I think the thing that draws us most to, or the first comparison that comes to mind when you have a live action, and I'm going to use the word remake. Anytime a medium already exists and you are changing the medium to a different format, if something was a cartoon and now it's a movie and it's a live action movie, if it was a cartoon and now it's a live action TV show, if it's a comic and now it's a cartoon, anytime you change the format, I think there's a risk of alienating the audience from the visual perspective, as you pointed out. If you are going to, there has to be enough similarity between the original medium and the new medium visually so that we still feel connected to what we already know. But there's also that aspect that has to be, we'll say, appealing to the new viewer, to the person that's not familiar with the original content. So if the theme is dark and gritty, then it has to look dark and gritty. And I will say there's a lot of Batman comics that actually have more color than you think.
Yeah,
Um, but
like a lot of that retro stuff, and it's cool. And I wish honestly they would do something with that. Like I feel like James Gunn would be a good person to have like just
yeah,
like okay, we got dark and brooding like Nirvana Batman. He's
I
still
want
gonna
to
get to make his next movie, but I want to see
right.
crazy purple suit, pinwheel spinning. Like I want Batman tied up to like a pinwheel at a carnival, just like spinning around.
Right. And I mean, and you know what? That's going to appeal to a very large audience, believe it or not. And
Absolutely,
there needs to be
like
one or two
the Joel
times where
Schu. Okay, so the Joel Schumacher Batman movies are looked down upon because honestly, the Batmans are bad. Jim
right.
Carrey was crazy good. And it's just like
Fantastic. as Riddler.
He's Riddler straight out of the comic book.
Right.
Like bright neon green suit.
Believe it or not, Tommy Lee
hair.
Jones was a great Two-Face.
He was a great Two-Face. And it's just like, sexy teen angst Robin. All right.
Yeah.
George Clooney. Okay. Like you're not the guy who's like your parents were not shot in the alley.
He's not the guy who traveled the world to learn the skills to come back and save the town. He's the guy who he would be in an alternate universe where he stays home, collects his inheritance, and eventually just runs the company.
Yeah.
That's that multiverse Bruce
Superman
Wayne right there.
I'll believe him as Superman, but that was just bad casting as Batman, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I think that also goes into something you mentioned earlier as far as like the contractual obligations people have and the marketability of a movie. Because when you have
Green Arrow.
Do what?
Green Arrow.
Yeah, he would be a good Green Arrow. I would absolutely believe that. Because he's smug enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And honestly, that was probably my only real issue with, and this is side tangent, but with the show Arrow, Stephen Amell was fantastic as far as being the physical character. And when he was like the Green Hood or whatnot, he was great, but he never really embraced or was believable to me as an Oliver Queen, the way the character Oliver Queen is in comics. I gotta wait. I'm okay with the not having the blonde goatee that's pointed and whatnot, not having the Errol Flynn look. Oh, that's fine. I mean, I get that when you have to make
you look crazy.
Right. Like that's not realistic.
You're the only white man on the planet with this. Like everybody's gonna know it's you.
Right. You know what I'm saying? But it's like when you see that so consistently in comics and you see that so consistently on the cartoons, Justice League Unlimited, and stuff like that. When you don't see that, it really like it does take away. And that visual sometimes is the one thing we look for. And I think that's why, the very first comparison people have is it's that nostalgia. Remembering the original or, being familiar with the original and how accurate does this look? And that's not even to say something like you take the live action Lion King, which I think was a poor choice for live action because it was animals. I think that's why
they did that because the Jungle Book worked.
Ain't no humans in the Lion King though, and it's like
I know
because you at least have Mowgli, and you understand the necessity for the CGI because these animals are talking to Mowgli. And even from the cartoon where you had the human boy talking to the animals, since it was all animated, it was fantasy anyway. But when you have the live action Mowgli talking, even if you go with the old one with Jason Scott Lee, you know what I'm saying? Even when he talked to the animals and the animals were a little bit more CGI, and it almost seemed like they were just kind of like talking to him through telepathy or something.
Yeah.
Even that's more fitting. Because it still gives us that nostalgia. It still plays off what we already know and we're familiar with. And it just, brings it more into this particular visual because we're telling this story instead. Doing a shot-for-shot remake of something like Lion King was, although it could be a questionable choice because it's just like, oh wow, this is the exact same movie. It just happens to have real animals instead of animated animals. I think that's why people may not be drawn as much to some of the live action remakes because I've only seen one or two of them. But then you have an opportunity for something, and this is one now. The movie as a whole, I'll leave up for everyone to have their own personal opinion. But Aladdin, in terms of a live action remake, I think that one was done very well from a visual standpoint.
Yeah.
Given the locations, the character, the casting, you know what I'm saying? And even like I think the biggest challenge they had with that was Robin Williams' Genie.
Yeah.
Nothing you do is going to get around that. It's always going to be overshadowed by that. So, Blue Will Smith, eh. Will Smith's humor is different than Robin Williams' humor, but because this was like Hitch 3. I'm not even going to say Hitch 2, but this was like Hitch 3, where the genie is basically playing matchmaker and he's trying to get these two people set up. And hey, there's a little love story of his own in there, you
Yeah,
know.
that was weird. But I get it. You Will Smith.
But it was also, to me, it was somewhat refreshing because it was a different spin and not just the exact same movie, but real people.
True.
And that was, like you said, they're just telling a story about a genie because it doesn't necessarily feel like they were trying to remake Disney's Aladdin.
See, okay, this is what I think. When you do stuff like that, I feel like it would have been better to do what they do on like Once Upon a Time and tell the story from another person in the movie's perspective. Because do like they kind of did like just do a shot for shot remake of Aladdin, but then they just spliced in a genie love story. And so it did kind of feel like this came out of nowhere because it feels like we're following Aladdin because we've been following Aladdin. But it's almost like if you're going to do a live action, why not just instead of making a live action remake of Aladdin, make a live action movie of Aladdin from Jasmine's perspective?
Or
Because
just make a
we
Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Just use the original base story, not the Disney version, as the
well, I say,
basis.
well, I'm
Because even
saying
the
like,
Disney version is based on another story.
yeah, but what I'm saying is more like, let's meet the like you want to meet the idea, in my opinion, when you translate something sometimes too is this something where we need to change our perspective on these characters? So I say that, and I think I don't know if you've ever seen. I don't know if you're into like going to plays and stuff, but if you've ever seen Wicked, right? That is
Right.
basically the story of how everybody in the Wizard of Oz got to where they were, right? Like, so it's basically a
Right.
Wizard of Oz prequel, but it's also like translating them from book slash film to stage.
Right.
And they do that not by going in from the perspective of the Wicked Witch of the West is the Wicked Witch of the West. It's like, who was she before she was the Wicked Witch of the
Right.
West?
What
And
happened in
that
her
is
life
what,
that made her become?
right. And that is the compelling thing about Wicked's story rather than just going to see the Wizard of Oz again. And
Right.
so that's why I say, like,
But see, I think
yeah,
that
if you're going to make to me, it's like if you're going to make these movies if you're going to make live action stories of something that somebody has watched probably 1,000 times since they were a kid, The Wizard of Oz being that for like a lot of people, like Disney movies being that for like most people in my generation,
yeah.
the thing that is going to be intriguing is a new perspective because that's how you end up being able to also update the movie so that it's not like so you're not apologizing for like shit that was okay 30 years ago but it ain't okay no
True. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is absolutely a that well see that becomes more a question of just remakes in general. Because if you are and I don't think that a live action falls victim to that because if you go and you look for an animated Cinderella story, there are hundreds of animated Cinderella stories.
yeah
There's Disney's Cinderella, which is the most prolific. But you can find something in the dollar grab bin at the dollar store that says Cinderella on it, and somebody sat and drew the whole movie. It's out there. It exists. And I think something like um so we had, and here's a good example of what you're talking about. So we had 101 Dalmatians live action, Glenn
Yep.
Close as Cruella. And then
Yes.
later we had Cruella.
Well,
We had Maleficent, which is the story. Maleficent is the story of Sleeping Beauty, ultimately. But the story Maleficent is from a different perspective. And I think just in terms of movies, using the perspective of other people is a fantastic format. You know what I'm saying? I would love to see what was there was an I think it was DreamWorks animated the superhero Megamind.
right.
Megamind followed the villain all the way from his journey zero to hero kind of thing, but everything was we get to see from the villain's perspective. There's a cartoon I enjoy right now. It's called The Venture Brothers. It's The Venture Brothers is hilarious to me, and one of the best things about it is they follow the villains so much. Dr. Venture is just like this screwball wannabe scientist who's basically fallen off. He's a nutcase. But the villains are so intriguing. They are so interesting that it makes the show worth watching more times than not. But yeah, I think something like Cruella was a great example of what you're talking about, where you can do a remake, you can do it live action, and because you're shifting the focus, you're able to tell a different story while telling the same story. Or that might Cruella might even fall into the category of prequel, which
It is.
yeah.
But
But
I
I mean,
mean,
it's like
even when
that's
you did the original, even when you do the original, like live action 101 Dalmatians, right? It is loosely follow, not loosely, but it is like fairly loosely following the story. But you see way more Cruella in the live action movie. You see way more of the like stealing the puppies becomes a much bigger thing, because if you're gonna show me like 101 real life puppies, this can't be no like cartoon scoop 'em up. You know what I
right.
mean? And then we just teetering off in some like old rickety car and then cut to. You know what I mean? You got to show me more, because I'm looking at real dogs, not like cartoon dogs. Like the
Right.
way y'all scooped them up in the cartoon, that makes sense. But you're not about to scoop up real puppies like that. So that's one of those things where it's like you look at the live action things that even if they remake it and use the same story, it's not they're not doing a shot for shot remake. They're just telling the same story and they're saying, "All right, this is how we have to show this using this medium." Like the people doing shot for shot remakes, those are the people I'm talking about standing on the fence looking at somebody else's yard, like trying to make their yard look like that, but it's like you don't have the same kind of grass as them. So it's never going to
True.
look like that. Or if you try to feed your grass what they feed their grass, it will kill your grass because your grass doesn't like that. Like you have different, you just have a whole different situation going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to get back to this comment here. Rurouni Kenshin is probably the only good true to anime live action we have gotten. And I don't necessarily think I don't think it's the only good and true. Um, I think it's the only one that was a true adaptation and it was good. I think that is maybe, I'm wondering if that's what the comment means, because there are some that are phenomenal adaptations, but because the content itself, like it has the look down pack, everything is right there. Um, I went with the wife to go see Alita, Battle Angel. about the little girl cyborg,
Yeah,
and it's a
shit was
cyberpunk.
creepy.
Right. It was. I mean, her eye. That was really weird with
It
the
was
eyes.
creepy.
But my wife, she enjoyed the movie. Like as a live action, she really enjoyed the movie and thought it was great, and the visuals and the action, everything was in place. And so I told her, I was like, well, this is based on an anime. And later on, we went home, and might have been a week or two later, but I found the anime online, and we sat and we watched the movies. Um, the anime movies, I want to say I think there's three. The live action movie takes two of those stories and kind of mashes them up into a single movie. Um, but my wife was able to kind of pick out the parts that she remembered, and like, oh, that's what that was from. Oh, that's what that's from. And of course, like she was doing the whole pointing at the screen thing the whole time because it was stuff that she was familiar with from the movie. And I think that was also a really, really good live action. There has been a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and that is such a weird animated. That's such a weird anime to begin with.
I've
To
been.
see that done live action
I don't even know what it is. I've scrolled
is
by it many times.
so. Let me see here. Let
I'm
me.
like, maybe one day I'll get to it. I got to get back to Hunter x Hunter, but
You know what? I can probably bring this one in and let it be up while I talk about it. Let's do an entire screen. Boom. There we go. So here we go. And it's like the when you watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, all the stuff that you see, like that's how my man's hair actually looks in the animation. And this is how it looks in the movie. Like they got it dead on. The outfits, the weird fighting styles, and the stands. The stands actually coming in. It's amazing. There again, it's one of those things that like I think it was a good. It is not a great live action movie just because the movie itself was a little weird. And if you weren't already familiar with the content, you're not going to get it watching this one movie because they're like seasons and seasons of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And to try to do like a single movie and tell the whole story, got to get you caught up real quick. That doesn't always work. Um, and I think that was probably where it suffered. And you take something like there was Death Note. A lot of people had some feelings on Death Note, but I think ultimately it did a good job as well. It had light, it had L, it had the necessary things to be what it needed to be for that movie. Full Metal Alchemist, another one that I think and Netflix is responsible for a lot of these. I think it's worth mentioning that as well. Like Netflix, quick to hop on some stuff, but um, they have a pretty substantial anime collection, and they have the rights to a lot of anime that they get to show. You know, but some of those I think were also done very very well, just in terms of translating the animation into live action. If the story was lacking, or they told a different story, or they tried to be original with something, sometimes that kind of fell off. But just in terms of what was there and what was presented, a lot of times that came off really, really, really good. Um,
yeah, and I'm glad like you take your time. I think too. I just want to point out we are trying our best to always point out positive examples of when it
right,
has worked because I don't want this to come across as like we are anti live action remakes.
Oh no,
But
not at all.
for me, it's like it's not just about like I feel like the thing about it is technology has gotten us to the place where we can probably make a very realistic looking live action version of probably any cartoon that's been created at this point.
Yeah.
But the question is, should we? And
That
then
is always the question.
if the answer to that question is yes, then the next question is, well, how should we? And I think like people are just stopping at can we, and then can we is leading us to shot for shot remakes because we can do a shot for shot remake. All right, well, let's just do that. But there's nobody in the room asking, well, should we do a shot for shot remake or should we try to take another angle or perspective on this story?
Yeah.
And then it comes down to, the money man basically having the foresight or the cojones pick which one to basically be like, yeah, let's try another perspective on this. Because, to keep it real coming from their perspective, it's like it's hard for them to look at and say, like, well, this thing worked and we've sold 50 million VHS tapes and this many DVDs and it's got this many streams. So if we just make this again, people will watch that too. And they don't factor in the fact that like people don't want like a second version of the thing they already like. They want another thing that they like. And so even if you like a remake or an adaptation, it's not because I don't think there's any adaptation that anybody has ever been like, I like this because it is a shot for shot recreation of the thing it was adapted from. The Watchmen movie comes to mind. Visually, when you read the Watchmen comic book, I read the comic book after I saw the movie, and I was like, damn, he really made like a panel for panel, like remake of this book. He literally put this book outside of the like little interludes about the like pirate ship. He really just put the book on film.
Yeah.
But then you compare that to something like the Watchmen TV series, where I know it is an adaptation only in that it lives in that world.
Right.
Of Watchmen.
That is an original story.
Yes. And so when they start asking, like, okay, well, how should we tell this story inside this world? Should we just tell the story of the comic book? No. Should we offer a completely different perspective on this since this is a new audience who probably like never would have read this before? Yes. Absolutely. Go from there. You know what I mean? And that's at a network, not that I'm praising any networks at this point for any sort of decision making, but I will say at least creatively, HBO seems to be a network that understands when you have a talented creative, getting out of their way sometimes is the best thing that you can do because most of their like comedies and sitcoms are these like from the mind of such and such. You don't have a whole bunch of shows on there that feel like this is some executive's idea. Some executive saw these three comedians and was like, let's put them all together. Like HBO shows feel like someone's cohesive vision and not just like we need something to get some ratings on Thursday night.
So that makes me think of the upcoming Borderlands movie.
I don't know nothing about Borderlands.
So Borderlands, okay, so first of all, the big issue with Borderlands is that it is a video game. And video game movies have always kind of had a stigma of not being good to begin with. And over the years, they've gotten better. And I think when you make the comparison, video game movies, I feel like Super Mario Brothers movie is a fluke because it was animated. And therefore, it had the luxury of being able to still do things that are only possible in a video game, live action. Whereas, and that's something that I think really it plays a part in live action movies versus animated be it video games, cartoons, anime, whatever the case may be. There are some physical limitations in terms of practical stunts. You have to then incorporate the CGI, and the moment you do that, now you've got to make it look a certain way, or you're going to lose people. Um,
Yeah, I
one
would
of
say I was just say I just wanted to chime in. I think that the challenge in the Mario adaptation, even though we're talking about live action, the challenge in that was coming up with like a story
yeah,
because yes, Mario games have a story, but it's largely like
save the
nonsensical.
princess. Princess is another
Yeah,
castle. That's the
yeah,
story.
and the reality too, I think like that's one of those should we. I don't know. Like, there's just no human being that I'm gonna look at and think Mario. Like the way the character is designed, it just and see that's where Sonic has Mario beat
Yeah,
because Sonic is not a real like he can look crazy because he's a hedgehog from another dimension.
right.
Mario is a human. So unless you're gonna do like he comes through the pipes and lands in the real world, but he's still just like CGI Mario. And it's like, all right, like we may as well do a Muppet movie at this point. Like
Take a whole Who Framed Roger Rabbit kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, I mean that definitely plays into it, and and that's why I still want Mario to get his props as far as like being a good movie. It was enjoyable, that sort of thing, and I'm surprised they came up with a story that was even remotely entertaining. So kudos to them for that. But
And I say from a business sense, not only did they come up with the story that was entertaining, they also built a world that like the Donkey Kong movie coming at some point. So
oh
now
yeah,
you've created like another
avenues.
like an even easy spin-off franchise.
Oh
The
yeah,
Mario Kart TV show coming or something. Like you you creating these things where it's like it's easy money now.
yeah, yeah. Borderlands being based on a video game, it's it's already a so the basic story behind Borderlands is you are on this world of Pandora, and people are searching for relics. And you get the relics, and the relics give you power, and you are think of it as like you're basically a mercenary, and that's what it is. Now,
Is that the game where it's the shirt with the dude like this?
probably
It's like the little white guy with he looked like Ren 1010 kind of.
no, 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 no. This is the one where um,
Sorry, geeks. I'm
no, no,
embarrassing
no. I
myself
mean,
right
like
now.
the Borderlands game, they've got 3 games, a couple of DLCs and side games. Um, it's a really popular multiplayer 4-person co-op shooter. They have a bajillion gun. Like there's just so many different weapons and drops that you get. Game was Gearbox Software. I'm trying to think of a way to describe it that someone who
No,
would
I'm
know
looking
would
at it
know.
right now.
Um, the big
No.
thing there was a song by Cage the Elephant called "Ain't No Rest for the Wicked" that was really popular at one point, and that was the theme song for Borderlands, and that was what everybody knew, and that was what everybody was familiar with. Um, One of the things that's really interesting about this movie, and of course, we've talked about this in the past as far as just like movies don't hide anything anymore. They try to draw you in. They give you way too much, way too early. They don't build up any suspense or intrigue, but at the same time, they're trying to ensure that you are interested, and they have to sell you on the project. Um, Borderlands stars Kevin Hart, Kate Blanchett, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Black.
The movie?
Um, yeah.
I thought you were talking about the game. I thought you were talking about the video game.
Oh no, 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 no.
I was like, damn.
Um, Cheyenne Jacobs, Edgar Ramirez, Olivia Richters, Ryan Redmond, Stephen Boyer, uh, Charles Babayola, Florian Mun, Montanu, Gina Gershon. It's got a few names and it's got a few people. We'll say that. Um, what stands out the most about this is that one, they're trying to do Borderlands, which, oh my God, how are you going to do this movie? What is the central story we're going to focus on? Two, these casting choices are a little interesting. Not
All right.
bad, but definitely interesting because as it doesn't really look like the cast the way you would picture them in the game. So now we have to, contend with that part of it. And again, here's a situation where it's like, you know what? Borderlands was fine as a game. Did we really need to make this a movie? Did this need to be live action? I guess we'll see and we'll find out.
All right. So, speaking of video game adaptations, there was one that just came out that I watched all of in one day.
Would you go through Halo?
I couldn't stop. No, I've been watching Halo. Twisted Metal on Peacock.
You know what? I didn't hate Twisted Metal.
I didn't either. I went into it really just like, how is this? What is this even going to be as a show, right? Because Twisted Metal, like the game, I don't remember the game having like
a story.
Character stories. It was more like you just pick a guy and you try to make it through all the races without like your car getting beat up. But it wasn't like if I win, I get an XYZ or this or that. And there was no world building. You didn't know anything about the world outside of the arena in Twisted Metal. So
very, very little came from it. I mean, this Twisted Metal is such an old game. That's the first thing. Like we're talking PlayStation 2. I think the last versions of the game were on PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
And so you're talking like early 90s. Maybe the last one in like 2000 or something like that. Twisted Metal is
it's a demolition derby game.
Right. It was a demolition derby. And it wasn't really like a main story game, if you will.
Yeah.
But there was a story mode, and it was basically like, survive, defeat all the enemies, go to the next level. Defeat all the enemies, go to the next level. Defeat all the enemies, go to the next level. And as with like, in the same context as like some fighting games, like the early Mortal Kombats or the early Tekken games, each character had their own motivation for participating. We did not get the full like background to all of that. Yeah, like we didn't get everything that was involved with that in the game, but it was there. You know what I'm saying? And they would usually give you like just a little bit here and a little bit there. There were the characters like Callisto was the person who was behind all of the roller, or not roller derby, but the demolition derby tournaments. You know what I'm saying? He was the one who set all those up. So there are aspects of it that were there, but like there was no quiet, you know what I'm saying? Right. John Doe was just the character that you played as if you played the default car. You know what I'm saying? But as you went through the game and you unlocked other cars, you got to play other characters. You know what I'm saying? Sweet Tooth was a main character, if you will, because he was like the face of the franchise.
Right.
Um, and it was like, I want to say there was a lot to do to actually be able to play a Sweet Tooth. I'm trying to recall. I feel like you could play a Sweet Tooth in like the second one. Maybe he was
Yeah,
like
I think he was
available.
like. I think he was like, if I'm remembering correctly, which I could not be, he was like the big bad in the first one, and then in the second one, he was like a playable character that you could unlock or something like that. But either way, like the world that they built in this show to make you understand why people have like guns and missiles on their car was phenomenal, in my opinion. Because if you had just given me a show where it's just like, this is what we do, it's like, who's who's coming to see this? Like, how are y'all like not getting robbed like as soon as y'all leave like where y'all going? And so, I think even season one being more of just like a world introduction, character introduction before we even get into like a Twisted Metal tournament, I think just like, I don't know, like it was just interesting like how like the direction that they went with like some of the character development where it's just like, this is a video game show? Like
Yeah.
social
No, this was
commentary and everything. I mean,
what stood out to me, and we've I know in one episode of something we've talked about, I've talked largely about the difference between inspired by and based on, and I think it is important. Like, okay, when we were talking about Halo, as a matter of fact, we can go back to that. When we first talked about Halo, I was like, okay, so this ain't Halo. This exists in that world, I guess, but they're doing something completely different with Halo. They're just doing their own thing. Okay, damn. So y'all just doing what y'all want to do, because this ain't the story of Halo right here. This ain't 117. This ain't Master Chief. This ain't my Master Chief. Hashtag not my Master Chief or whatever. It was like I felt some kind of way about it, but as I kept watching, I was like, this isn't Halo, but I like the story y'all are telling. I like what you are doing with a Spartan who stands out above the rest. And sure, why can't it be Master Chief? Okay, cool. By the end of the series, I'm like, okay, yeah, that could be Master Chief. Sure, I'm good with that because the story they told was good. Twisted Metal, I sat down. I was like, man, what is this? What is this I'm finna watch? But you know what? I like Anthony Mackie. So I'm going to watch Anthony Mackie. And I didn't realize how much I like Stephanie Beatrice.
yeah.
But apparently I like Stephanie Beatrice too. And watching them together, I was more
Great
like,
chemistry.
right. I was more interested in just the show I was watching than trying to tie it back to Twisted Metal. And I think when you do that, that is successful. That is good. I stopped looking for what makes this Twisted Metal and more about how is Quiet and John Doe gonna get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like, okay, so the big rigs, they stay on the go and they drive them close to one another and they hook them. That's kind of, like you said, I was more invested in the world building than giving a damn about how they gonna make this Twisted Metal. And
Right.
Samoa Joe and Will Arnett as Sweet Tooth, that was humorous. It kept me entertained. And I had to warn the wife at one point. I was like, you know what? This is not for the faint of heart. This is gory. This is bloody.
Yeah.
This is an M-rated video game
That's what makes it
all the
Twisted
way.
Metal.
Right. This is absolutely that thing. But yeah, I have to say, I was quite impressed, and I enjoyed it as well. And I think that's an example of a live action adaptation done right, because it's like when I heard there was going to be a Tetris movie, I was like, bro, you can't make a movie about Tetris. Oh, this is okay. So the movie is about the creation of Tetris and how it became super popular for a minute. Okay, cool. Okay, that yeah, you could make that movie. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not about the movie is not about the building blocks falling and coming together to make lines disappear. You could not convince me there would be a story to that. But then you have some shit like Pixels with Adam Sandler, and it's like, well, maybe you could tell that story.
Right.
Maybe you could make it a good movie. If like, okay, see, and original Mario Brothers movie wasn't done right. And I have to say, I'm not pissed off about Bob Hoskins as Mario, even to this day. I am a little pissed off about Dennis Hopper as King Koopa. I got feelings on that. And what the hell were those dinosaur looking Koopa like? Huh. But
See, but that's the thing you have to do when you set Mario in the real world. You got to explain where these dinosaurs in the sewer are coming from.
right. Now these are
And
supposed to be mutated turtles, like even if they was fighting against the
but
coming out of the shells.
we know where Ninja Turtles come from. Okay, the ooze went in the sewer. The turtles
Right.
was down there with the rat. They crawled in the ooze. Like
The
it don't
same
make no
ooze,
sense.
the same ooze that blinded Matt Murdock. Marvel confirmed. Just
Like
saying.
here's the thing. You just gotta understand like how much people need to know, right? That line is different for everybody. Like especially like you married, so you already know. Like yo, somebody tell you something to relay to your wife, right? It's gonna be follow up questions,
Yeah.
but we
I've
never
learned to
ask
ask.
them. We
Look,
try to ask, and you did a good job if you can answer all the follow up questions.
right.
The average viewer, when you watching a movie, we don't have that many follow up questions. It's usually like, who is he? Where are they? How did that happen? Like, if you show me like giant mutated turtles, and then you show me a sequence of their baby turtles in the sewer, even in the new Ninja Turtles, the explanation for it is like it's like a little bit more explained, but not like they just explain where the ooze came from and how it happened
Right.
to go in the sewer and all that versus the live action Ninja Turtles that just came out where they tried to make it seem like, oh, these were April's pets when she was a child and she would come visit her father at the office, and that's where the turtles, like, get out of here, bruh. Like
Yeah.
that's too much connection. And now you lying.
That makes
You know
it
what I'm saying?
weird.
When
That makes it
somebody give you
weird.
you give me too many details. Now I feel like you lying to me. Because now I feel like you're making stuff up and you're being over specific.
Right. You giving me details I ain't asked for to questions that I don't have. Now you making me ask questions I wouldn't have asked otherwise, but it's a little weird.
Right.
No, I absolutely get you there. No, I think when I think about some of the video game movies, the most recent Tomb Raider I think was really good with Alicia Vikander. I wanted
Agreed.
more from that just because I think she was a fantastic
Laura Croft.
Laura Croft. But keep in mind also that the games did that whole big reboot to go back and reintroduce the character and ground her into a little bit more realism so that we didn't get the not Laura Croft version, but what's her name? Angelina
Angela
Jolie
Jolie.
version, where, okay, so she's already a billionaire, jet setting, globe trotter, not architect, what's the thing called? Archaeologist, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just have to accept this is what is. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, sometimes if you are just like dropped in, this is what is with no explanation, cool. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it leaves you scratching your head because it don't seem believable. If you want to
Right.
tell me that Angelina Jolie is a Russian spy and she's been deep cover for so long that she actually became a real spy for the US and give me salt, I'll believe that because it's believable.
Yeah, people definitely will tell her secrets.
You know, but it's like, but it's like if you tell me that it's not even to be chauvinistic at all because Dial of Destiny has, I think, set up a good female globetrotting archaeologist vibe. Um, Check that out if you want details on that. But I think the way they told the story with Alicia following the new games, where they have a younger Laura Croft coming into her own and becoming the person that we know to be the Tomb Raider, when she, Rise of the Tomb Raider and that sort of thing. And it's, kind of prequely, but it's also just like a full reset on the character, which really had no ties to the previous. When they redid the movie and used her for that, I love that. And I thought it was fantastic. So there's another good video game adaptation. I think Uncharted had the potential to be so much better.
Bad casting.
I really think so. But and the
Not
funny
bad
part?
cat. Not. I'm gonna say
Wait,
this.
what are you
Not
about to say?
bad.
Okay.
Not. I said this before on the show. But it's not bad casting because either of those actors were bad in the role. It's just Tom Holland was doing a Mark Wahlberg impression the whole movie. So it was basically like listening to Mark Wahlberg talk to himself the whole movie. And I just I don't know that I didn't know the Uncharted story at all. And I was
Right.
literally waiting for the reveal to be that like Mark Wahlberg is actually his brother because it's like y'all sound exactly alike. And like y'all have the same mannerisms, y'all breathing at the same time. Yeah. It's like it's just
They
like
bonded
this
too
is
much on that
eerie.
set. They bonded
Yeah,
too much on
yeah,
that set.
yeah.
No, I mean, and I would agree. I think the casting choice for that is, I think if you had changed either one of them, it would have been a different story. I think Mark Wahlberg would have been good as Sully, and I think Tom Holland would have been good as Nate. I don't think those two together, like they didn't have the playful banter and back and forth that they did. Yeah, sure, they kind of seemed like siblings and they could have been like brothers and maybe they get along great off set. But on screen, it was irritating. Watching the two of them together, it was like they're just old enough to compete for the same woman, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that dynamic throws it off because I don't really feel like there was any kind of mentorship that could have taken place. And maybe Mark Wahlberg just looks too young for the role. Maybe that's the problem. Tom Holland looked a little too old for the role. Whatever the case may be, it didn't work for them. And that movie did not come across the way it should have come across. I think if you had gotten someone different to play Sully, we would have been just fine with Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. I also think the idea of making Nathan Drake a little bit older. But of course, they were planning on having multiple movies. I don't ever think anybody goes in with the idea of, I just want to make one movie. If
Well,
I can
no,
just make
not with
this,
a franchise. If
I
it's
just,
just one, is it more than one video game?
exactly.
Okay, then it needs to be more than one movie. Yeah, I
And
think
so,
I think casting is definitely a thing that it's I mean, we do our fan cast is just, as a, experiment to see, just to give our point of view, but I definitely understand like casting is difficult. There's a lot of politics behind who gets what. There's,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And unfortunately, luckily for us, there's no pressure on us to like actually make any money with anything we cast because it's just all fantasy. But
right.
there's a lot riding on it for some people in terms of family, career, etc. Putting the right person in your movie could, make or break it. Um, which is why a lot of times studios get involved when they probably shouldn't, because they're like, who we can get for this movie will make or break it, and we can get somebody who we think will put butts in seats.
Now that
And
definitely plays into the risk and reward aspect that Hollywood takes on. And you had mentioned earlier that one of the biggest things is because we have the technology, like we have the technology exists, you
mhm.
know, we could have Dragon Ball, we could make a Dragon Ball Z movie, have characters go Super Saiyan, have them fly up in the air, fight in the middle of the screen. They could clash, have a flash of lightning. We could have them move so fast people couldn't see it. All that can exist. But the question becomes, just because we can do something, should we do something? What do you think is ultimately the draw towards live action?
Well, I think that a lot of times when we think about animation, we do think about it kind of in this non-human way, but like animation is voiced by human being voice actors, and so there is still like a human element to it that we're connecting to. And I think that there are some stories that get told through animation that people connect to, that make people say like, can we connect to this in a different way, be it through, you know
We'll bring Cinja's comment back up a
yeah,
moment because it ties in what you're saying.
it's yeah, I think it's just like what you're saying. I think with any sort of adaptation is, I would like for this to be experienced in more ways than just the way that it already exists, because that's how good it is. And if you're a person who connects to it, I think you look at it and you're kind of like, I would like to see more of this. I would like to see another director's interpretation of it. Like and I guess I'm just speaking for myself. As an artist, part of that process in my schooling was learning how to appreciate art, and
Right.
so I'm not a person who gets offended when I hear a cover, because one, if you know anything about the music industry, most of your favorite artists started off doing covers of something. Now they might have made it more famous than the original, but that doesn't mean it was their original creation. It's still a cover. It's a song that it was existed. It was written by somebody else and performed by them. So I think it's one of those things where there is there is an art to translating something and adapting something.
Right.
And I think that I would just want to see people, make the best attempts they can at creating something that they're proud of and that can connect to people. And so if there's a comic book that connected to people, and that like movies connect to people, doesn't it make sense that like a movie about the comic book character would be something that would connect to people, because all you're doing is taking two mediums that people already connect to. I mean, people don't think it's crazy when you make a comic book out of like a movie. Like if you make a movie and then you come behind the movie and make like a 10 issue comic like sequel of the movie and telling stuff that's going on in the background, or you do a prequel of the movie in a comic book form, that's not strange to people. But I think it's because people kind of have this tiered view of the arts, where like, because movies
Mm.
make the most money,
Mm.
they're the most important.
Ooh.
And because comic books are more niche, it's not something that is going to cause a large uproar when you go back down, quote unquote, the other way. So really, it's
Wow.
about
That's
how do you hold what esteem do you hold the arts in? I know a lot of people, who read, and I know there's like science behind cognitive functions and the benefits of reading and all that stuff like that. This is not an anti-reading ad, but there are people who look at books, a book as always going to be superior to the film, right?
right.
And generally those people are people who like to read anyway. So obviously, like you're biased,
The book
which
is
is
better.
yeah.
The book is better. The
I'm
book is
and I-
always
I'm
better.
and I'm gonna be 100% real. I'm married to one of those people. I love her with all my heart and soul.
I'm a book is better person, so I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. So and then a lot of and I just have come to the realization that the book could be better, but I think the thing is the book is different, and so yeah, it's a different medium, so you can process things differently. Like a book is not necessarily restricted by page count. Like you're talking about publishers and all that stuff, but a book can be as long as the
The
reader
book
will
need to
read.
be. Yeah. Okay.
And so you have an editor that can come in and say,
This why I had you on the show for
you
shit
need
like that.
you need you need 20 more pages. But 9 times out of 10, when you go to a movie executive, it's like we need to cut 25 minutes. Like your magnum opus 3-hour movie, like we need to cut an hour.
What movie we were talking about something recently, and it was like, oh, Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Spider-Verse Part 1. You know what I'm saying? Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. People got to the end of that movie. I was one of them. It had just slipped my mind the day I went to the theater. I was like, bro, we
I
not
didn't
gonna
know.
finish this story. The fuck
Yeah.
we get to the end and it's like, we not done. Part 1. Oh, hell no. I would have gladly sat there for another 2 hours to wrap it up, to resolve
Yeah.
the story, because I was immersed. I was involved. I was in
Right.
it. And
Right.
when you catch a good show on Netflix, like you said, you watch Twisted Metal in a day. The
Yeah.
shit was actually pretty good. I
Yeah.
finished it in like 3 days.
Yeah.
And it's like the thing with so being a book is better kind of person. Here's what happens in a book that does not happen in a movie or a TV show a lot of times. In a book, our character, our hero or our heroine, our main character goes to meet somebody. And when they meet that person, there is about 10 pages of description of their first interaction. We get the setting, the time, the place, the location, how they felt about it. You are drawn and immersed mentally in what is taking place. All 5 senses are activated for the character. They give you all of the details. Those 10 pages are like 20 seconds on screen, if that. Everything that was in the background that you needed to be there to tell you everything you needed is just a shot on the wall. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, because it was just one of those things where like I kind of felt like it was an Easter egg that I picked up before other people noticed it, and I was, I was a little geeked out about it. But when I watched Daredevil, the Marvel TV show on Netflix, Daredevil, when Karen Page is talking to her editor, and the editor is sitting there in his room, he makes some offhanded comment that kind of tried to tie in this Marvel world to the MCU. And he talks about how if it's not people with giant hammers or a billionaire with a metal suit, da 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 da. But the important thing was in the background of his office was a headline that talked about the Battle of Harlem on a newspaper clip.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, That was one of those things that might have flown under the radar. But they were talking about the Incredible Hulk. And when Edward Norton's Hulk was fighting against Tim Roth's Abomination, that took place in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like that description, that would have been something the character noticed in the book. They would have brought attention to that. They would have had you immersed in that moment. But it was like on screen for 10 seconds in the background. And if you weren't paying attention, you miss it. And I think that's what happens a lot of time with movies, which is why people who do read the books like the books, because we get those extra details. Another thing,
but that comes down to the medium again, right? How you and this is for me why like I enjoy movies more than reading.
I'm gonna put Sinja's comments up. I want to come back to this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person where when I'm reading a book, when I do anything, I construct it visually in my mind, right?
Right.
So like if I'm reading a book and two people are talking, in my mind, I'm watching a movie of them talking.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's like when I read a book, I'm watching a movie. So I don't really have an issue with it being like, all right, well, I just am going to watch the movie of it happening, because I am looking like at everything in the background and noticing the Easter eggs that would have been, expounded upon in 3 paragraphs that's on screen for 10 seconds. I don't intrinsically see, but I think I guess what point I'm making is because of that, there becomes this intrinsic value to the book over the film as an art form because of how it's perceived by society in a lot of ways. I'm not saying with you, but I'm saying in how that conversation goes, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, I didn't read the book and I'm not going to read the book. And I sat down and watched all the Hunger Games movies. So if you want to talk about the Hunger Games, cool, we could talk about the Hunger Games, but just know I'm talking about the movie. You're talking about the books. Now, there's fundamental things that maybe I'm not going to understand the same way you did because they do change stuff for the movies. Like apparently, PETA is supposed to be like a mammoth of a man, and Josh Hutcherson's like barely 5'6".
Right. But I mean, the way he threw that stone was everything you needed to know.
Right. And when I watch the movie, I'm kind of just like, would PETA being gigantic makes less sense, at least for the first movie to me. Because like now basically you're saying he a big old bitch. And we expect him to really make it through all this.
Yeah.
Like now.
But see that, and that goes to this comment right here. And I think that's where there's a little bit of superiority complex that exists in books versus movies, because casting is so important. And I don't envy casting directors at all, because people won't admit it. I will. The couple of times that I've had some screenplay ideas in my head, I wrote those based on XYZ actor. The action, and I get that it can be, scaled back to be open for anybody, but no. I wrote this book with this person in mind. I wrote this story with this character, with this actor. This is who I modeled this character after. And I expect that person to be able to play this person in my movie, in my script. In my head, that's who it is. And I think a great example is, Sinj actually says here, and I want people to just hear the comment, the casting problem is they hire to play a role instead of finding a person who is the role. Too many actors play the role with little heart in the role, and it shows through the movie. I think when people take a book and they turn the book into a movie, one of the first complaints is that person doesn't look like that. It doesn't meet the description that was given in the book. Now, there is a little bit of free room because of adaptation. You have to change this, you have to change that. Some things don't translate well on screen. And they do like test markets, and they might record this and show it to some people, get some feedback, and realize that, you know what, people just weren't feeling the purple hair. So we're going to make her be a brunette. It's still a dark color. It's whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't translate. And so they make whatever adaptations, whatever adjustments they need to make in order to make it work. Like we talked about earlier, Oliver Queen, my man had brown hair. He had the bright blonde with the pointy goatee. That's what I wanted, but it wouldn't have made sense. And that shit would have looked corny as hell. And Stephen Amell probably ain't got the face for that kind of beard. So when you have this book and you're reading this story and they give the description of this person, much like you said, you create a movie in your head. You have your main character, your main villain, they're talking to one another. That scene is playing out in your head. How many times have you casted somebody in a book based on an actual actor that you think fits that role? If you do that, and that is the person, later on, when that gets made into an actual movie, automatically you're triggered. Whether you know it or not, unintentionally, that person doesn't look like they looked in your head. And we've talked about how so many times the story we've made in our head is not the story we're getting on the screen. And I have a problem with that. And I'm willing and able now to admit and recognize that's what the issue is sometimes. And I can take a step back. And I encourage all of you listening to be able to, work on that a little bit as well, because we all bad, and we've all been guilty of it at some point. So I have a son whose first and middle name are based on two characters from the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles, my favorite series of books. I own all of them. I've read them numerous times. That is Interview with the Vampire, Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned, Memnoch the Devil, Tale of the Body Thieved, Pandora, Vittorio, Blood and Gold, Armand. I feel like there's maybe two more. Then there was like Prince Lestat was a recent one, and there's one other that I can't remember at this exact moment. But I've read all those books. I love those books. Tom Cruise is not what Lestat looks like. Okay, it's not. But when they were trying to get the movie Interview with the Vampire made, they needed a name like Tom Cruise to carry the damn movie. In order to get production started, oftentimes it takes having someone like that attached to the project for other people to get on board and cut the checks.
And then I'll say too, creatively, sometimes when it comes to characters, yes, a writer described the character a certain way, but is that description a vital aspect of that character's personality, to where if you change this, have you changed the character fundamentally? Right? Like,
right.
Because
that makes a big difference.
Because for every, like, let's take your favorite character, Superman. Yeah, you can want to see a black Superman, but like if a little black alien lands in the middle of Kansas and mom and pop can't get out, he's not getting adopted. You dig what I'm saying? Like when you create in the world, you got to ask yourself these like logical, like, okay, can we, should we, how?
And I would absolutely agree with that. I think anytime you have a situation where you gender swap, you race swap, when you change certain aspects of characters that already exist, if it does not impede upon the fundamental aspect of who that character is, it's fine. Doesn't matter. In The Batman, I don't think a black Jim Gordon is a problem. And furthermore, for those people who have read Batman Year One,
I do. What black man want that job?
Well, wait, that's where I was getting ready to go with it, though. Hold on, that's exactly my point. For those people who have read Batman Year One, you know what I'm saying? When you see the struggles and the problems that Jim Gordon had when he was just Detective Gordon, bruh, like it makes even more sense for Jim Gordon to be that outsider as he was. You know what I'm saying? Like it fits so much better. It's little things, and sometimes they, the nuances, they're there and they exist, and it's just you got to be able to find them and draw them out. And somebody like a Jeffrey Wright can do that because
he's a genius.
Jeffrey Wright, that dude, I love Jeffrey Wright. But you know what I'm saying? It's like him as Jim Gordon. Hot take. Hot take. I liked Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon more than the other guy they cast for Jim Gordon in the DCU. J.K. Simmons. I like J.K. Simmons. I like J.K. Simmons a lot. I think he's a very unique actor.
He's a great J. Jonah Jameson.
He is perfect J. Jonah Jameson. He is not a Jim Gordon to me.
Yeah, he's too gruff.
He's not a Jim Gordon. And even seeing the picture of him like being jacked in the gym and whatnot, because that was part of the DC diet or whatever, that didn't sell me for shit. Like I wasn't expecting to see Jim Gordon get out there and do nothing, because comic book Jim Gordon don't get out there and do shit.
The whole point of Jim Gordon is to call Batman.
Thank you. He's
there to turn the switch on.
Somebody got to turn the light on. I was not feeling him as Jim Gordon.
No disrespect to the Jim Gordon hive out there if they exist.
You know what I'm saying? The Gordonites. Like, I'm going to tell you Jim Gordon I do like. I like Jim Gordon or Harley Quinn. I love that Jim Gordon.
Yeah.
He is fucking hilarious. I love him. But no, I mean, I think honestly, that is the biggest thing for books. And I think whenever you've read a book and you see that book come to life, your margin of error is so small that you begin overly critiquing things that don't need to be critiqued. It is not being able to let go of what you've created in your mind for what's being shown. Now, there are times where they will just absolutely butcher a book in the story, and it's like, oh, okay, so all you wanted was the name and the rights to make it. Born Identity. And I say that as a huge Robert. You know what? I got a lot of history with Born Identity. We're not going to get into.
Yeah.
But
watch one of our other episodes.
It's
Sam
cool.
has gone into extreme detail.
But so the Born Identity is a story by Robert Ludlum, and it is a fantastic book, and it's about this super spy that loses his memory and has to go on this adventure or whatnot. Everything that was in the book that made this character of Jason Bourne interesting got left out of the movie. But what we did get in its place was Matt Damon action star. So while I can't complain about Matt Damon action star, it wasn't quite the same as all of the greatness that was in this book. Day of the Jackal with Richard Gere and Bruce Willis, that was based on a character that exists in fiction called, well, actually, Carlos the Jackal exists but he's one of those like oh, what do you call it? When you have a character that exists for the purpose of being the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? Like Carlos the Jackal is he's just the known bad guy. And everybody uses him. He's in so many different forms of media as the bad. It'd be like Jack the Ripper. You know what I'm saying? Like, since nobody knows who Jack the Ripper is, you could put Jack the Ripper in any story that you wanted to put him in to do and be anything you wanted him to do and be, because who's going to tell you it's wrong? That's what he is. Carlos the Jackal was a terrorist that was just infamous for being infamous. You know what I'm saying? And because of that, he's in a lot of different media. So Carlos the Jackal is like the main guy that they're trying to get in the Bourne Identity series. The whole reason this guy went through all of this training and did everything he did was so that he could go out here and capture Carlos the Jackal. Along the way, he got injured, he got hurt, he got amnesia, but because he had been under such intense training, the training stayed with him. Who he is, what his name is, why he's doing the things he's doing, all of that was gone. But that training, that stuck with him. That's the Bourne Identity. Instead, what we get is Matt Damon is a dude who doesn't know his name, but he can fight real good. There it is. Go make a movie. And literally the only thing they used was the title, the character's name, and they had Marie the first time. So irritated by what they did. They butchered this story. But at least they were consistent in their own 3 movies. So, you know what I'm saying? They didn't try to go back and fix it. They stayed on the path that they carved. They stayed on that path. And so, and because they got the rights, we have the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, and the Bourne Ultimatum, which is the actual name of the original trilogy. Treadstone 21, man, it's such a good damn book series that I feel some kind of way about what they did with the movies. The movies are good by themselves, but they are not good adaptations of the book.
Yeah, and that sometimes is about the business side of things too, right? It's like,
because maybe Miramax and Project Greenlight got to make their money.
Well, sorry. I think too it's more like
I still feel some kind of way.
Yeah, I know. I think like, there's IP is valuable. Yeah. And if you were just going to make a generic spy movie about a man who has amnesia, first of all, you're gonna get sued by the people who wrote Bourne Identity anyway, because they're gonna be like, a spy with amnesia? Nah, bro, you got to kick over them ducats. So even if they wanted to go in and tell a completely different story, that aspect of it alone means they're gonna have to bring in the Bourne people and have a conversation.
Yeah.
If the Bourne people come in and say like, yeah, we'll license like our character to your movie and we take this much money, like that's easy money for the Bourne people, right? That's gonna also bring in the people like yourself who like know the story or have at least heard of the, like, even if you've just been in the airport shopping, you've seen like Bourne something at some point on one of them book racks while you waiting to buy like your soda and gummy bears to get on the plane. Like, or you seen some old white dude sitting in the exit row or something reading Tom Clancy or some shit like that. So that really just becomes like a business move at that point. But at least like you're able to recognize like it didn't harm the quality of what they put out. At least what they put the name on is something quality and not like you just took the name, used it, but also like did not make something like good with it. And there's a lot of examples where you kind of like, why is it like, one I talk about all the time, Riverdale. This is really just a show about like some middle America like teenagers, and you could make this show and it could be about anybody. Like there's nothing truly Archie about it except for like Pop's chocolate shop in settings where like that could be any malt shop in any small town in America. You know what I mean?
There was something else that we talked about not too long ago that was like you could have called this anything because it didn't oh man, that's gonna bug me. Go ahead. But yeah. I mean that's absolutely the case. And there are plenty of times where the licensing and the IP and the rights to something, they know that they're going to draw in a certain audience just because it has that name. Now, I don't think that, while Robert Ludlum probably has a pretty substantial fan base just based on the sales he's done for his different books and whatnot, Lee Daniels, is it Lee? I think it's Lee Daniels, whoever wrote the Jack Reacher series. Singe, help me out because I know you know. Whoever wrote the Jack Reacher series, Lee Child, maybe it's Lee Child. Nonetheless,
yeah, it definitely was not Lee Daniels. He wrote,
right. It just occurred when I said Lee Daniels. I knew that wasn't right. I was like, wait, what? Wait, no, that's because that's 12 years. Okay, but so the guy who wrote Jack Reacher, the first Jack Reacher movie that has Tom Cruise, like that's a problem. And there are people to this day who are never going to forgive that movie for existing simply because of all of the descriptions of Jack Reacher are so far away from what Tom Cruise is. But Tom Cruise is that dude when it comes to action movies like this. You know what I'm saying? And he can still sell that bit. He can still sell that story. Tom Cruise is still one of the people that, like, as tiny as he is, if he walks in a room, it's gonna get a little quiet. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
like,
see, but here's the thing. Here's the thing when you talk about that, though, right? The question is, then why does this need to be a Jack Reacher movie? Like, Tom Cruise is not somebody who, I mean, essentially what he's mostly been doing is Mission Impossible movies, and what's the other one he just did, the sequel to Top Gun, right? Like, if we keeping it a buck, Tom Cruise should be able to go into a studio and be like, I want to make a movie about XYZ. He's proven he has real acting chops.
Yeah.
Like, this not like I'm not no like Tom Cruise super fan, but I can't really say, like, I haven't seen every movie he's been in, but I can't really say any Tom Cruise movie I've ever watched was bad because of Tom Cruise.
I know.
Which is not something most actors can say, right? So you really, like, that's when I'm always looking back at like the system, and I'm looking at the studio and I'm saying, Legend 2, was that the samurai movie?
You know what? No. Legend with Tim Curry as the big devil, and it's a fantasy. The answer is no, because Tim Curry can't return. That's why we can't do it. If Tim Curry can't be a part of it, then I don't care to do it. Sorry, ultra geek moment.
but I do think like that begs the question of just like, when we're talking about live action adaptations, some of this IP work is some of the only work studios are really willing to greenlight. Like, you're not really able to go into a studio and be like, I have this new and unique idea, unless you want to talk about, okay, yeah, The Mummy was not great, but that was because it was but here's the thing,
did it suck because of Tom Cruise?
It did not suck because of Tom Cruise. It sucked because they was trying to build a weird ass universe on the sly and not tell everybody, when all you needed to do was, like, this is the thing that everybody gets wrong about building a cinematic universe. They think that you have to come in on day one, movie one, and say, we're building this thing. All these other people are going to be in it. More people are going to show up. Keep your eyes open. That is not what Marvel did. Marvel made an Iron Man movie. At the end, Nick Fury shows up. And that's it. They made an Incredible Hulk movie. The only person that shows up more than Nick Fury in those early movies is Stan Lee. Like,
Yeah.
there's no crossover until it crosses over. There is like a hint at the potential, and those hints are very small and are never done in a way that intricately weaves them into the story, or so that that hint overshadows the story. And I think that's the thing when you're talking about a live action adaptation, but also trying to build a larger universe in a live action adaptation. It's like we don't know what's happening with everybody on the planet at one time.
Right.
So if this is an isolated story, I don't want to. I don't want to see files of Aquaman swimming and the Flash running fast in a convenience store. Like, I don't need to know that any of these people exist until they show up on my screen. And so with the Mummy, it's like you tried to make it Mission Impossible, but we already have an understanding of like what the Mummy franchise is, and it's not what y'all did. So y'all should have called it something else besides the Mummy. There's a lot of different things you can name a mummy. You could have called it sarcophagus, but like
Pharaoh's tomb.
yeah, but once you say mummy, the Mummy, you put a target on its back.
Because if it ain't the Brendan Fraser movie from back in the day,
And
what is we watching?
it doesn't even have to be exactly that either, but it needs to be adjacent to that.
Right.
Like, like my son, like people look at my son, they know that's my son. We don't look 100% alike, but that's my son when you look at him.
I get you.
You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of times people be trying to just stick the name on it, and they're like, we want to tell this really cool story. We want to modernize it. We want to take it out of the desert and this and that. It's like, bro, we just meeting this Mummy, and we got Mummy in the City. You know what I'm saying? Like, we doing Ernest movies at this point.
There was the live action adaptations are one of the other ones that comes to mind as just like a random ass adaptation. Battleship, the one that had Rihanna in it. Because like, how did Milton Bradley sign off on this? Like, it was like, you know what? People aren't buying enough Battleship. We need to get our name out there, and
it's because
be great for marketing.
It's because of how society sees comic books. They see comic books as toys for kids. So if comic book movies can make a bunch of money, then so can other kid things. Kid properties.
I am so looking forward to the Monopoly movie.
I mean, but you say that, but then like there's the Barbie movie. You know what I mean? But what did they do for the Barbie movie? They let old girl do her thing. Wasn't it Greta Gerwig? I haven't seen the movie, but from what I've heard, they let her do her thing, and they let her tell her story, and got out the way essentially. Yeah. And
I hear it's actually really good.
Yeah, I think it's one of them things where it's like, because everybody can read, they think they can write. Because everybody can watch a movie, they think they know what a movie should be and what should be in it. And it's like, you got to
the Monopoly movie would be fire, personally. But
I mean, but the reality is there is a way to make a Monopoly movie that would be good. But would a studio get out of somebody's way enough to like do it? I mean, Jumanji is basically a board game come to life.
Zathura.
I mean, it's not a impossible premise, I don't think. I mean, considering the housing crisis we have in America now.
You and me can sit here and write a Monopoly movie. Don't trip.
Yeah.
We could absolutely write a Monopoly movie.
Yeah, I mean, they're making a whole bunch of toy movies. It's all like,
no.
But here's the thing: they've been talking about it.
It was like a Hasbro verse or some shit.
Yeah, they've been talking about it's GI Joe, Transformers, But like Hasbro's been talking about making movies for years, bro. It's like they didn't have like Micronauts and all this other shit
Oh yeah.
slated.
Yeah.
At the end of I mean, spoiler alert for the last Transformers movie, if anybody saw it, but you know that has a tie-in to another franchise, and it's like, but y'all still can't get that franchise right. How many movies have y'all made within that franchise that like just did not catch on for real, for real? You know what I mean? And you know, you even take a franchise like Transformers, right?
Yeah.
Transformers, honestly, should be easy. It's not even like it's just a toy. There is a story. There's all
The
these
battle
multiple
for
storylines,
Cybertron.
but they keep trying to do like something different. And it's like the ones that worked are the ones that told Transformers stories that we could like understand because of our already like basic knowledge of Transformers.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
then you
it's
have the
not even
ones like
just relying on the nostalgia, but it's having a basic understanding of what a transformer is and telling that story. And that's
right.
one of those times where like live action works. But then some of the other ones are like, what?
Right.
Huh? What's happening here?
Like
And
take for
they do
instance,
lose
like
us.
like what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, you've made this thing, but you want to make something else. Like let's look at it from the perspective of a different character. I feel like the Bumblebee movie is a perfect example of that, right? Like
Right.
Bumblebee has probably been the most like consistent transformer other than Optimus Prime in all of these movies, to the point where like Bumblebee was not a transformer that was like popular when I was a child. Bumblebee's popularity is strictly like he wasn't popular. Like I don't remember nobody ever coming to my house with a Bumblebee transformer toy. It was like Optimus Prime, Megatron. Like I mean, even for me, even going into like Beast Wars, like you know, jazz sound with like people who said Bumblebee. Like you know the maybe when it first came out and everybody was just enamored with all of them. But after it was out for a while, for people who like my age and kind of that more 1.5 or the second wave of
Right.
Transformers lovers,
Okay.
like Bumblebee was not like a Transformer I could even name. If you were like name 5 Transformers, I wouldn't have said Bumblebee before the movie came out.
I see
So
that. Yeah, it's just like I'm like I don't know, bro. Bumblebee was always a top 5. Like he was because he was
for I'm
like he was
saying
one of the few that was named and always on mission in the early cartoons. If you go back and you watch like the original series cartoons, and whatnot,
yeah,
see that's my era. Those first cartoons. But
yeah.
I understand what you're saying as
But
far
when
as by
it
the time you
devolved
get
into
around to
being
like Beast Wars and some of the other stuff, like okay, yeah,
and
I get what you're saying.
and when it devolves into just like for me, mostly I know Transformers from the toys. Like there was always new ones, bigger ones, and you know the whole Bumblebee thing. I learned more about that going back and watching the cartoon after the first movie came out because I was just like, that's cool. But like,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I get what y'all are
I
saying.
I think the Bumblebee movie though
This old
was
heads
a
is feeling
great
some kind of way.
example. Yeah, was like a great example of how to reintroduce that character and kind of show more about him, basically him being like the first transformer to come to, not the first transformer, but the first of that group to come to Earth. He's the first to interact with humans. It makes a lot more sense of how like they interact, and it's you know there's parallels between like the first movie as well. It kind of makes sense where it's like you know Bumblebee is not freaked out by meeting a human because you know
Right.
Bumblebee's been here. Okay, if
Yeah.
y'all tell me Bumblebee's been here, like let's hear a little bit about that, what that story was like, and what that world was like, and what it's like for Bumblebee to be here solo versus like Bumblebee being here part of like a bunch of other Autobots who all have like rockets and missiles attached inside of their like car like figures. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think just like even pointing that out as like somebody had to sit down and be like, okay, Bumblebee is a character that has been gaining a lot of popularity. We're selling a shit ton of Halloween costumes. We make Transformers t-shirts for kids. Bumblebee absolutely has to be one of the characters included. Like these are all things that like are said and happen when it comes to like discussing an IP. So then the question is, okay, well, people seem to be a little bit burned out on Transformers movies, but they still like Bumblebee. How can we capitalize on the popularity of Bumblebee? Okay, we could make a Bumblebee movie. Cool. Should we make a Bumblebee movie? I mean, the answer to the question like that is like very murky and sometimes tied to the answer to the next question is like, well, if we should, how should we do it? I think going prequel was a smart idea. I think having Bumblebee be basically the only Transformer in a lot of the movie was a great idea because I think the thing that the thing that the first movie did that the later movies didn't do was
GoBots Leader One.
Yeah. I think the first movie really focused a lot more on the like transforming human interaction.
Right.
And as you got further along, it's like all these big crazy things are happening, but yet Transformers, like the next movie you come back and nobody knows what Transformers are. It's like this big, still this giant conspiracy. Like, is this in the Men in Black universe where somebody comes in and just like laser beams you? Because I mean, I guess technically Transformers are aliens, so that will fall under the division of Men in Black to
there you go.
deal with. But
so Sector 7 was actually MIB who evolved into the
right.
All right.
Right. And so the storytelling got murky and convoluted, and I think they got away from what worked in the first movie. And I think with Bumblebee, I think that was an easy way to like hard reset. You go back to the same formula you did before. Bumblebee meets, person.
Robot meets human. Human freaks out. They become friends. Save human.
It's basically E.T.
Yeah, I was about to say save human. Human doesn't want it to leave.
Government
Robot has to leave. Yeah. I'm with you. And it works. And that is a good formula. And I think probably the biggest concern I have now just for the Transformers franchise is they don't realize they got like two different stories happening.
It's like have y'all rebooted or not?
They came down and they started going this way, and then they did this story, which is over here, and then the next one after that took place after the third movie, but has nothing to do with the fourth movie, and then the most recent movie takes place before all of this shit. It's like, well, wait, when did you? So was y'all on Earth or not? How was y'all just now coming to Earth in the 90s, but showed up for the first time in the 2000s, in the late 2000s on top of that?
Yeah.
So these are different. And see, it's only okay now because we have seen as the world has become more versed in time travel and multiverse, we accept shit that we shouldn't be accepting because there's no way we should be okay with this last Transformers movie because you upset your own timeline and you did not clarify or state or acknowledge that this was completely separate, but you gave us the exact same Prime. You gave us the exact same Bumblebee. Is Megatron involved in this at all? Yes or no? No, he's not because we're looking at.
But also, we got Beast Wars when.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was. Yeah. It's
all right. You know what? A lot. People keep showing, but the problem is people keep showing up for Transformer movies, so they gonna keep making these bitches.
I mean, I'm gonna say this: the movies be good.
They be good.
It's just the timeline makes no sense. The universe makes no sense, and so I just accept now that like Transformers, great airplane movies. Like, don't try to connect them to each other at all. Just watch what's happening.
Every one of them is a standalone. Okay.
Unless you see the same person in both.
If it's
in
not the
more than one
same
movie,
human,
it's
exactly. The only time is if the human is the same from movie to movie, that's a direct sequel. Those are connected. Anything else, it's a
for debate.
standalone variant of said story. And I don't know. I would really like for I actually had this conversation with somebody just the other day. We were talking about Transformers. We were talking about the newest one. He was asking me, did I see it? I was like, yeah, I saw it. He's like, what'd you think of it? And I was like, they wrong as hell for that twist at the end. One, because that dude was not convincing to me as one of those people. Like, that's the guy that you want to represent them? No. But more importantly, like, Sector 7 exists. I like Sector 7. Now you saying is this instead? Oh, come on. It throws me off and it's a problem. And it's like you have to just take each one individually. So any Transformers that are going to be involving Beast Wars, that's its own thing. Any Transformers that have Shia LaBeouf, that's its own thing. The Transformers with Mark Wahlberg, that's their own thing. And none of them cross over with anything. It's like these are different variants of the same general story. Right. Ghost in the Shell's like that because you got Standalone Complex. You got what is it's not segment 1, something 1 and then something 2 because they have like different that's gonna bug the hell out of me. I gotta look that up real quick. But yeah, Ghost in the Shell. And you know what? Ghost in the Shell is one of those that outside of the controversy of what Ghost in the Shell was, I think they did a good job of the visual adaptation of all the other characters. Let me say that. Of the team, I think that was, given what the story of Ghost in the Shell is, that had a chance to be really good. And I think the only thing they really needed to do was not feel that they needed a name to sell it. Because even though she's an actress and can play anybody, maybe you shouldn't.
Should you?
Right. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't play anybody. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
But also, you can't.
You really can't. You really can't.
The things you would have to do to play certain people
is not going to be good for your career. So stay. She could be really, really light skinned, but oh man. Okay. I was gonna look that up, but that would be too much sidebar. I don't need the sidebar. Okay. Live action. Overall, I feel, in my opinion, it's a money grab. I think more times than not, the original IP stands alone and does well enough on its own that it doesn't always need to just get a live action version. I think, Jeff, you make an excellent point with going the route of Wicked. And if you are going to do a remake in general, tell a different story in the same vein. And I think that's just good advice for remakes as a whole. I don't think it applies just to the live action. But if you are going to do something live action, you got to capture the feel, the look, use the same, not color palette, but what was it?
For me, I just look for the same vibrancy. Like if you're adapting something that was bright, then give me a bright film. Something that doesn't even, doesn't necessarily feel real. Because I think the reality is, what you want to do is an adaptation, not a version. Because Adaptation means you are accounting for not only the story but also the medium that you're using. And I
The
think,
medium that exists.
yeah, well, yeah, the one that you're using, because what you can do for like you were saying, you can write 1,000 words just about like a picture on the wall in a book, and people who read books will eat that up because that's what people who are going to read books is going for. They're going for a lot of words. But imagine then taking that and making 1,000 words about a picture on the wall into like an internal dialogue monologue inside the head of the person. Nobody wants to see that movie. The whole damn movie is just them talking about this picture. Like, so you have to adapt it to the actual medium that you're using. But I also agree with what you're saying. I think you need to I would say, either change your perspective or change your 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 story. And so if you want to tell the same story, tell it what is the new perspective on it that is provided by having the ability to do something live action, right? Like, okay, and all the other political, racial, whatever things aside, right? You can make a Little Mermaid adaptation from the perspective of Prince Eric. You can make a Little Mermaid adaptation from the perspective of Ursula, right? That's a different movie, even though you know the story. You get all the fans who like Little Mermaid, but you also tell something new, create something new, put a new conversation out there. Whether it's good or not, it's for the people to decide. But I think when you try to it money grab does feel harsh, but that is the reality of. I don't think that every project that is an adaptation starts out as a money grab, but the reality of it is any studio who makes it is going to want to know why it's worth their while, why they should sign the check to do so.
Yeah.
And so, especially when you're dealing with IP, because you have licensing fees a lot of times on top of that, where they're like, if I just make a movie idea and I write it and I come, they just got to pay me. But if I come to you and I say I want to make a Mario Brothers movie, now they got to get Nintendo involved, and whoever Nintendo got to pay for creation and rights and all this other stuff like that. So there is like, an added fee that comes along with it. Yeah, that's what I was saying before about the Little Mermaid. It looked like what it looks like underwater, but I don't necessarily want to go see a movie about what it really looked like underwater. Like, it's not a documentary. Right. Like, you can make things live action and they still be fun and vibrant, and they don't have to. You can make a live action something that is not true to life. Like, the only thing you need for it to be live action is human beings playing the roles and not animated characters playing the roles. Yeah. That's it. Live action does not necessarily need to mean I can go out in the natural world and find it looking exactly like this. Like, now you take one underwater thing in terms of like Black Panther, the underwater scene there, that being dark and all that makes sense.
But that was a story element.
That was a story element, and that is like based on a world that has already been built. Like, we have seen that the MCU world is very similar to the world that we live in. So you can't go underwater to Namor's people and it be, bright purples and pinks and hue, like, because we know it's dark down there. And we have to account for Shuri being down there, and she can't really survive under all that pressure, et cetera, right?
All right.
The Little Mermaid, we have not established shit.
We have free reign, and what we do have for reference tells us she got thingamabobs galore.
Well, you're not gonna convince me Under the Sea is better when it's dark as hell down there. Like, the whole Under the Sea sequence is
one of the most colorful things ever,
and that is done, and that's done to show the appeal of being under the sea, right? Like
Right.
the whole Ariel's whole ethos is up where they walk, up where they run, up where they play all day in the sun. Like the brightness of what happens on the surface world is what is attracting her. So so if you're going to try to sell staying underwater to someone who is attracted to something bright, that is going to have its own inherent brightness in it. Like, who cares if in real life you know what I'm saying? In real life there would be no mermaids down there. So
Not that far down.
you know where we choose to
Or
draw
they
that
would
line
glow.
of where we choose to draw the line of reality.
We got glowing ass mermaids out here living at the bottom of the
Yeah, but they
ocean.
probably would.
They would have to. Bioluminescence, it would be a requirement at a certain depth in order to be able, because they would still be half human, so they would still have regular eyes. They would have, the upper bodies would still be human, and therefore they would have to be able to see, and human eyes don't do well without light. So there would have to be some evolution of bioluminescence. Think like Aqualad when he uses his powers and his arms
Yeah.
glow, at the very least. At the very least. And it's crazy that we could even sit here and have a semi-scientific discussion about mermaids living at the bottom of the ocean and the requirements involved.
Yeah.
I
think
they have 50 feet. No, he got it. They got 60 feet of dark vision. Okay.
Oh, got it.
But you know what? They still got to roll. What they got to roll a D10 for that? Got to at least roll.
I think for me, the biggest thing when it comes to adaptation is understanding the medium that you're working with,
Right.
but also understanding what you're adapting and like what to keep and what to lose, right? Like, because you're adapting, so everything can come. But then you get to add stuff that you weren't able to do before, right? Like the benefit of seeing a live action person doing is to feel more connected to the character. So you already have that, right?
It's a class skill.
If I just think like I don't see an issue with adaptations. I don't see an issue with doing live action adaptations. But I do see an issue with doing live action versions of the same movie. You know what I mean? Like adaptation, you're changing, you're making it work. A version, you're just recreating what somebody else did, just in a different form. And it doesn't always translate. And I think that's what people are responding to. It's not that people have like a fatigue of Disney movies or superhero movies or anything like that. What people have a fatigue of is things being made that are not good and being given to us, and we are expected to consume those things just off the strength of us loving geek content or loving Disney or loving DC. And so you got people with a spreadsheet that's like, well, Green Lantern sold this many comics and Cyborg sold this many, but people know Teen Titans and this age demographic is blah 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 blah. So this is how we're choosing to use Cyborg as our Black Justice League member over John Stewart, because studies show and we're worried about this and blah 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 blah. Whoop de whoop. Okay, cool, man.
Booyah sits well with everyone 18 to 35.
Exactly. And it's just like, okay, but like, what did the person who tells stories for a living want to do? Like, you told me what the person who makes spreadsheets for a living wants to do. But how does the person who tells stories for a living, like, because when you add it's like back in the day, I know you remember the Pepsi challenge, right?
Yeah.
And there's like a whole thing with the Pepsi challenge where it was like people in the Pepsi challenge choose Pepsi over Coke. But it's like, that's because you're only taking a shot of Pepsi. Like, most of those people would prefer to drink a can of Coca-Cola over a can of Pepsi. And like the studies showed that as well. But like, that's not you're not going to put that in your commercial. Oh. And I think a lot of times, like, that's what these
we're only going to highlight the points that make the points we want to make.
Exactly. And so that's what they're doing. They're doing the Pepsi challenge on all what IP to use, what characters to use, who to cast, all this other stuff like that. When the reality is, when you create an art, like, yes, you can give me data and I can consider that, right? I do research when I do my own art. There's no artist worth their salt that doesn't do any sort of form of research before they create something. Even if it's just like, I got to draw a kitchen and the kitchen has a toaster on the counter. I don't know what a toaster looks like. You're not just going to draw one out of your mind if you've never seen a toaster before. Right. Then you might even look up and be like, okay, well, it's this type of character. This character has a lot of money. So they're not just going to have a regular rinky dink toaster. They're going to have the 8 slice joint. Or this is Peter Parker and he's broke. So he just got whatever toaster, his toaster pink because it was Aunt May's toaster. And she just gave it to him when he got, you know what I mean? Like, these are the types of things.
Stickers and only work on one setting.
Exactly. And so as you are creating things, you're not just creating what people see, you're creating things that people overlook as well. You're creating everything about that world. And you're not going to be able to come to me with just like a spreadsheet and me just be able to say like, all right, I'm just going to do what's in this spreadsheet. Like there's like physical ramifications even in a fake world that you've created. There's still rules in that world. There's still physics, even if the physics are not the same as the world we live in.
Right.
There has to be some sort of like structure in order for people to understand what's going on.
As with everything, you know what I'm saying? Movies have the job of establishing their rules in that world. They have to establish a certain type of rule and things like that. And oftentimes, movies will give you certain visuals and show you certain things to make sure that you understand how this works, how that works, what's normal, what's regular. Oftentimes, when you do a live action adaptation, they do enough of the regular stuff to show you the connections that you already understand to help you recognize that this is the real world, as opposed to, animation where you never see certain things. You know what I'm saying? And it's minor little details. Like one of the things that comes to mind is, here we go, taking it all the way back, bringing this joint out, the live action Flintstones. The live action Flintstones was helped in large part by its casting. John Goodman, Rick Moranis, Rosie O'Donnell. I can't remember Wilma's name, but I remember Betty, remember Barney, and I remember Fred. And of course, remember Halle Berry was in it. And they had a lot of the things that you expected, but now we were seeing them instead of the traditional 60s Hanna-Barbera version. We're seeing live action. We're seeing real people do the things. And when we saw Fred Flintstone bowling and he did the little twinkle toes bit and it was, we heard the same sound to help us remember that that's what that was. Having those cues to help you see what is, it brings back some of that nostalgia. Other times you have live action movies where, like you take Little Mermaid. Now, when we watch the movie Little Mermaid, we don't think of like, it slips our mind for a moment that like they're breathing underwater. That everything they're doing is underwater. But then you have a moment where something like
But see, here's the thing. You know how you could show that? Colorful bubbles.
Colorful bubbles. But a good visual was like in the Aquaman movie when they would want to talk underwater, they had to create the air pockets to stand in to talk because sound doesn't travel through water the same way. They had to use hand motions and sign language and they would point to where they want to go, and then they'd swim really fucking fast over there, and then they get there and they go under the ship and they create the air bubble and they talk for a moment because they have oxygen to carry words. You have to set your rules in the universe, and so it's like in that world you have to make those rules and you have to abide by those rules. I do think the draw to reality is a big part, and that is why the establishment of those rules is important, because we like the fantasy element of whatever it is we're watching, whether it be an anime adaptation, a video game adaptation, a comic book adaptation, a cartoon adaptation. We like the fantasy element that exists, which is why that original IP is already doing well and well established. We like the Transformers cartoons. We like the Super Mario Brothers video games. We like I was talking about. We like the Tomb Raider video games. You know what I'm saying? Like that shit sold very well. We like playing Twisted Metal back in the day. You know what I'm saying? So of course it was like I was intrigued to watch Twisted Metal just because it had the name Twisted Metal. If you had told me post-apocalyptic TV show starring Anthony Mackie and Stephanie Beatrice, maybe you would have got me to watch it because of Anthony Mackie. Probably wouldn't have. I would not have inherently watched it because of Stephanie Beatrice. Like that would not have been the draw for me. She's not Rosa. I don't know who she is. Now I'm saying this. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll check out something else she's in. This was actually pretty good. She did her part. She was good as quiet. You know what I'm saying? But it's like I watched it simply because it was going off the strength of the name Twisted Metal. Turns out it didn't have to be called Twisted Metal.
Right. And I think too, there's like a curiosity with it where it's like it's the kind of property where you can go in and just be like, I don't know what this is. Now you can go in and say, I don't know what this is, and have your arms folded and just be like, that's dumb. I don't understand. Why would they do that? And it's like, or you can go in and say, I don't know what this is about to be, but I'm going to just go along for the ride. And a lot of times when you just go along for the ride, even if the first few episodes is like you come out the gate with the action and it's like, but why are you in the mall? Why are you on the open road? Like what, how, and a lot of people could watch that and be like, man, Twisted Metal is supposed to be a car demolition derby tournament. I don't know what all this divided America. I don't know what all
this. Man, what this mailman crap about?
Milkman.
Milkman.
Yeah, but it's like actually they devised an interesting story. They were able. It seems like they were. I would be very curious if this was something that was created specifically off of the prompt, create a TV show, 10 episodes about Twisted Metal. Or if somebody had been like coming up with something and they were just like, yeah, take this idea, but just like make it Twisted Metal. Because you could see a TV show about like a driver who had to go on a mission between two cities. But
it could have been called, the show could have been called Evelyn.
Yeah. It's basically
it would have been dope if it had been called just Evelyn. Or it could have been called The Milkman. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it would have been fine. Having the attachment to Twisted Metal gave it some nice little Easter eggs and some nice little throwbacks, but for the most part,
I don't necessarily feel like Twisted Metal was like a beloved enough game where like I had to look up everybody. I was like, are all these people in the game? Because I didn't remember nobody. I just was like,
I remember the only person.
The cars.
You know who I remembered? Sweet Tooth. The damn clown. That was it. That was the only person.
Honestly, you could have named everybody in that show somebody completely made up, and I would have been just like, all right, whatever. Like I don't know the difference.
I can't even.
Sweet Tooth is literally the only thing that made it Twisted Metal. Because you could even just be like, yeah, okay, he found
Roadkill.
Yeah,
Roadkill. Sweet Tooth, Roadkill, and Calypso.
I mean, all
those were the only things I knew from Twisted Metal, and I can't even couldn't even recall all that much.
Yeah.
And right, because I mean, again, like there wasn't much to the game in terms of like story that you could do anything with. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like some Pac-Man shit where it's just like, level, 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 and there's nothing there. But there was not a lot of story involved with it. Much the
They
same
never
way,
got out the car.
yeah, like much the same way you play a fighting game and there's like just some basic story as to why they're fighting. There's some basic story to why these people are driving. And having that open aspect, that big question mark behind it, it gives them room to go and create and do something fantastic. I think when you have a very well established IP, be it anime, cartoon, book, whatever the case may be, when you make that transition from another format to the live action, much like you said, there is a bit of a hierarchy. And I think a good example would be like on the base level, like comic book and manga fall into the same category as maybe the lowest form. Animation, anime, so like cartoon and anime are the next step up. And then from there, movie. And from there, live action movie. Ooh, we're going to make real people do this stuff. You've arrived. You know what I'm saying? And it's like everybody that gets that live action treatment, I don't necessarily think deserves it because I think some things are good enough on their own as they are, and they're not going to translate well. Other times it's like, sure, why the hell not? Give it a shot. Can't hurt, you know? And I don't think there's ever been a situation. I think it's harder on the movie than it is on the original IP. Like, I don't think I've ever watched a movie, found out it was based on this, and then went and read that and was like, that sucked. The movie's where it's at. And so, because of that, I think in most cases, if it's done in a sense to help build, I won't say build the audience, but we're so against the gatekeeping aspect of it. If the only thing a person knows is MCU and they like that, I am definitely going to encourage them to go and read some comic books. Because if you like that movie, you're going to love these comic books. You know what I'm saying? And they have their choice. The problem then becomes like knowing which ones to read because every comic book is not going to automatically translate to the characters you see on screen because of those changes that take place. And the same holds true with any version of live action. Any version of live action, because there is the potential for change to take place, because there is the people take certain freedoms, they take certain liberties with the IP, and sometimes it's simply because of the required adaptation. As we discussed, because it's going to be in this form of media, you have to change this, you have to change that. You run the risk of alienating a few people who came for this and stayed for that. It comes with it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like anybody who was like super into the MCU and they love Tony Stark and that's their favorite character, they might be upset to read some of the comic books that feature Tony Stark because it ain't Robert Downey Jr. You know what I'm saying? And he isn't always as loved as he is. He isn't always cracking jokes. Sometimes he's an asshole. He's a little bit of a dick in the comics. And so they have to make that adjustment. And it doesn't, they're not getting Robert Downey Jr.'s charm to come through on screen. There is that adjustment. But overall, I still think that more times than not, no, Mark, you did not miss the conversation about Snow White and the Seven Creatures. That is a live action update that is coming. It's on the way. We really didn't even get into all of the live actions that are coming up. just because there are far too many to name. Because I mean, we're at the point now where like you can literally, let me see, I've got a tab open right here that shows a parade of horrors, every upcoming live action anime adaptation. This was written April 20th, 2023, and it has stuff on here that I did not even know about. My Hero Academia, Mobile Suit Gundam, Hellsing, Naruto, One Piece, One Punch Man, Pokemon, they're trying that again. Saint Seiya, Knights of the Zodiac, which we actually just saw Knights of the Zodiac came out. Steins Gate, Sword Art Online, Your Name, Tokyo Revengers, Yu Yu Hakusho. All of that is like coming. Until it actually hits production, it doesn't really count. You know, somebody had an idea, said, "Hey, we should make this." So when this stuff gets reported, but One Piece has like, I think they've wrapped principal photography and filming, and it like that shit's done. They're on the back end of it now. You know what I'm saying?
I'll probably watch that. I'm not going back and watching 7,000 episodes of any TV show.
No.
So,
I mean, Avatar: The Last Airbender is getting pretty close. From what I understand, we should be seeing something come up on that.
I mean, my whole thing with this for any upcoming adaptation is this: I'm gonna look at the trailer, and if I'm not interested, I'm just not gonna watch it. I'm not gonna. It's one of them things where it's like like I said before, I'm always going to try to come at it at least giving examples of things that do it well, because there are good examples of live adaptations. I think, the percentage of bad live adaptations to good live adaptations is probably on par with the percentage of bad movies to good movies, even including original ideas. But I think because people are looking at a live adaptation as a slam dunk, like, oh, well, this should be easy because like they already made this movie, you just copying of it. It's like no. That's not how adaptations work. Now, if you're letting the creative come in and do what they do and tell the story how they want to tell, and it's bad, okay, cool. But if you had a whole bunch of studio executives making all the choices and deciding who is going to be in the movie and what story to tell and all this other stuff, it's kind of like, did you even make a live action adaptation? Or did you just paint by numbers something that like somebody with a spreadsheet told you will work? And so that's my whole thing. I just got to be able to look at it and tell, like, is this something where we're getting an artistic vision, or is this something where we're getting a consumer products rollout? I mean, you're going to get it with both, but the vision is important. And I think that any art has the potential to be good. So I'm never going to just look at it and be like, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't make this at all. But it's like, maybe they should not have made that version. And maybe there's a way that it could have been done in a way that worked. So
yeah. See, that. No, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that applies to some of the stuff we've covered in the past. Like I said, go back and check out our in-depth analysis of Cowboy Bebop, because that's kind of where this live action conversation came up. Like I said, one of our Facebook group members wanted to talk about the upcoming movies and TV shows. He was saying that One Piece was the one he was interested in. And then he was like, Cowboy Bebop didn't do it. And I think Cowboy Bebop failed. Ghost in the Shell failed overall. You know what I'm saying? But there were aspects of it that were dead on, and they were really good. And even some of these little knockoffs that Netflix has done, the Death Note. I think One Piece is looking pretty good right now. I'm very interested in the new Avatar. Full Metal Alchemist was really good. And then, of course, when you stretch from there and you talk about just some of the other live action adaptations, the live actions, it's like there's a lot out there that's really, really good. And of course, it got me to thinking, like, what What is the determining factor of making something live action? Why don't we have more animated things? So you guys sound off in the comments. Me and Jeff been up here. In a minute we're gonna start like talking in circles, and we don't want to do that to y'all. So I appreciate everybody who's come and hung out with us tonight. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this content, get other people involved in this conversation. They can put their stuff in the chat, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, share your favorite snippet.
Yeah, like if you had a segment that you like, find that part, clip it out, and put that out there for others to view, so that we can get a bigger discussion going. I like having 3-4 people for us to interact with. It is very helpful for our talking points. Me and Jeff will talk to me and Jeff. We ain't got no problem with that. We'll talk to each other. But when you guys participate, it gives us a lot more to talk about, and you bring up good points. Singe, Mark, Richard, I want to thank everybody who was up in here tonight. There were some others who were here earlier. I want to thank Dark Venom. He swung by for a little bit. Teresa, she came through. Shout out to David Gordon for giving me the idea for this show. I'll be sure to tag him in it so that he can see it and see that we talked about it. Sorry we didn't cover One Piece more, but it's a lot of episodes to watch to try to explain it. It looks good so far. That's best I can tell you. We'll get David in here to give a yay or nay on it as soon as we have it. We'll probably do a full episode coverage. No, that was you. That was promised. That was what you requested. Promised is not the same as requested. But we'll talk offline about it. You know what? Maybe I'll hop on Destiny and give you something there. But this has been Weigh In Wednesday. I want to thank Jeff for hanging out with me. Be sure to check out JPNT17, where you can get all your exclusive artwork, get you a dope ass Spider-Man shirt. You know what I'm saying? I got a custom Hobie shirt. Don't nobody else got that but me. I'm sure he sold some more, but I'm gonna pretend like I'm the only one that's got it, and it's super ultra exclusive. But I'm gonna tell y'all where you can go and you can get it. Be sure to follow us on everything you can at Grown A Geeks. The QR code is always up there. It's not there at the moment, but we always have it up there. And go back earlier in the film, we got it. For Jeffrey, for myself, Elder Geek Sam, we are Grown A Geeks, and we are out of here. Peace.